MD.
Tarek, could you reshare, please, with the sound from the computer? So reshare the screen and make sure to indicate sound from computer. Otherwise, you're showing us your speaker. Still no. Could you stop sharing and then do another share screen? And then start share screen, but with sound from the computer.
This paper tries to solve this problem by implementing a collision avoidance system using machine learning approaches. The dataset is collected from ESA, the European Space Agency, which contains the events conjunction data messages, which they call CTMs. It predicts a collision risk percentage between a target and a chaser object. We tried multiple different machine learning models. We figured the GRNN model predicts the collision risk with much more accuracy than other models. Now let's go through what problem we are trying to solve. The cost of space debris in space. Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development OECD published its report on the economic cost of space debris. I quote, economic and societal vulnerabilities to space hazards, in particular space debris, are growing. End quote. One collision in space can create thousands of fast moving small debris to destroy other functioning satellites. In 2007, the international destruction of the Fengyan 1C satellite increased 30% of the population of debris at that time. As you can see here, the debris orbits created by Fengyan 1C destruction. You can see how many new debris are being added to the space just from one destruction. If we look into this graph, we can see how many debris we added to the space for the last few decades. And this is the visualization of the space debris which are larger than 1 millimeter in diameter around Earth, taken from ESS website. And you can imagine how the existing satellites or new satellite would be in a big danger of collision within the debris and create more of them. So, the primary goal of our paper is to create a better collision avoidance system to predict the collision risk percentage between a target, satellite of interest, and a chaser, space debris or other satellite, to compare different machine learning model results to figure out the best fitted model. Also keep in mind, the paper only focuses on the risk assessment analysis and not the maneuvering of the satellite. Now let's talk about how the paper achieves the set goal. We collect the dataset from Kelvin's ESA Advanced Concepts Competition website. The data was pre-processed and transformed for our models. From the data, the risk of collision is being predicted to avoid highly probable collisions. It uses state-of-the-art machine learning techniques to find a best fit model for the dataset. And the techniques that we used are general regression neural network, artificial neural network, random forest regressor, support vector regression. To talk about other studies in this particular field, it was extremely hard to find previous studies on the subject matter. The space agencies use more traditional approach to tackle the situation. Although we found some studies which claims to use machine learning approaches to solve collision avoidance, but they are for aircrafts. It is needless to say, aircrafts are totally different from spacecrafts in this regard. We studied the traditional approach the European Space Agency takes to tackle the problem. Also, other machine learning approaches which helps reducing the size of the stored data necessary for the legacy hardware processing capabilities of the satellites. Currently, ESS Space Debris Office uses some collision avoidance services to compensate the issue. Their activities includes model development, re-entry risk assessments, and create development standards. Conjunction data messages, which we call CDMs, provided by Space Control Squadron are retrieved and analyzed to estimate collision probability, and to or not to execute maneuvering of the satellites. In this visualization, you can see the target and chaser trajectories with the Earth in the background. Covariance, ellipsoids, and CDM data are shown. It shows the visualization of conjunction details and object positions at the time of closest approach. The visualization is dynamic, means the target and the chaser together with their covariance ellipsoids are moving along their trajectory with time, where time can either run smoothly or is controlled by the user. Another study we found which used machine learning approach to help the traditional system to do a compression of stored data in the legacy hardwares of satellites. Traditional collision avoidance system requires high dimensional data and better hardware processing capabilities to process the data. Even after downsampling and dynamic programming, the data exceeds memory space of the legacy hardwares in the satellites. Deep neural network can serve as a robust function approximator in this case. As only network parameters need to be stored, it can reduce the required storage space by a factor of 1000. Let's go through the methodologies of the paper. So, after collecting the dataset from the ESA, we split the dataset in two parts. One is for testing and another for training our models. We did some pre-processing of the dataset to fit our purpose. We feed the training dataset to train the models. After that, we compared the results for both of the datasets on the trained model to see which one provides better prediction. Let's give you an overview of the data first. I already said the primary dataset is collected from the Kelvin's ESS Advanced Concepts Competition website. The dataset consists of real-world conjunction data messages which are prepared at the ESA. The CDMs are created after thoroughly analyzing and filtering hundreds of alerts which are issued every week corresponding to possible close encounters between a satellite and another space object. The dataset is as complex as it can get with varied degree of sophistication in terms of both analytical and statistical significance. With about 12 rows per CDMs per close encounter, there are 162,634 instances and 13,154 unique events in the training set. There are 24,484 instances and 2,167 unique events with about 11 rows per CDMs per close encounter in the testing set. A maneuver to avoid a collision is planned at least 2 days prior to the approach, and that is why no CDMs exist within 2 days of the time to closest approach from which we can learn. Primarily, each CDM in the dataset had 103 characteristics or attributes. For each collision, a time series of CDMs are considered as a single collision event. On the raw data, we did some pre-processing first. Among the 103 attributes, AP, C object type, SSN, and the shared ones between the target and the chaser were discarded. The final dataset for the study consists of 18 attributes including the target class with instances accumulating up to 1,87,118, combining the training and the testing data. After an empirical study of the attributes of the CDMs and risk factors, the 18 attributes were selected after excluding the above mentioned attributes. We also did a correlation matrix analysis on the data to see the existing correlation of the variables. After the feature selection, the whole dataset was thoroughly checked for missing and null types values and were replaced by the standard mean value of the column for a specific attribute. The data has been normalized before applying the algorithm as GRNN is sensitive to high deviation among input features. After cleaning the data, the values of the attributes are greatly varied because of the complex structure and characteristics of the dataset. For mitigating this large-scale variation, the dataset standardization and transformation of the attributes were done. First, the mean and max values of the attributes were found, and then the dataset was scaled using min-max scalar of scikit-learn. This is the probability distribution of the attributes in the training dataset. Let's go through the machine learning models here. General Regression Neural Network. The primary and main model of our research is based on GRNN. It is a variation of radial basis neural network. It makes prediction based on stored parameters. GRNN is also sensitive to highly deviated input features. The model consists of 4 layers. The input layer feeds the input to the next layer. The pattern layer calculates the Euclidean distance and activation function. The summation layer has two subparts. One is numerator part and another one is denominator part. Numerator part contains summation of the multiplication of training output data and activation function. Denominator is the summation of all activation function. This layer feeds both the numerator and denominator to the next output layer. The output layer contains one neuron which calculates the output by dividing the numerator part of the summation layer by the denominator part. The main advantage of GRNN is to speed up the training process, which helps the network to be trained faster. The network is able to learn from the training data by one pass training in a fraction of the time it takes to train standard feed-forward networks. The spread can be identified by the V-fold or split sample cross-validation. Unlike standard feed-forward networks, GRNN estimation is always able to converge to a global solution and won't be trapped by a local minimum. The second algorithm that was used for the research was artificial neural network. The model was compiled using Adam as optimizer value and mean squared error as loss value. The activation units in the layer was ReLU. To train the model, random 20% of the training data was used for the validation set. This is the configuration for our artificial neural network model. Random forest regressor operates by constructing a multitude of decision trees and keep the output of the class that is the mean prediction of the individual trees. For each decision tree, the algorithm calculates a node's importance using Gini importance. For training, the value of number of estimation was 100. This is the general configuration of random forest regressor. Support vector regression is an extremely useful algorithm because of its error tolerance tuning feature. It can be done via both acceptable error margin and error rate margin tolerance tuning. The model is based on the algorithm of support vector machine, and this is the general configuration of support vector regressor. The probability of collision can be explained as the probability that the debris object will intercept the sphere of radius r during the encounter, a set of trajectories for the debris and ISS given by RDO and RSO respectively, where ED and ES are the uncertainty vectors for the debris and ISS. Here the integral is over the sphere of r radius. The PC stands for probability of collision. P is covariance and the A is matrix of partial derivatives of the measurements with respect to the initial state. With the slightest change in covariance P, there may be fast changes in PC. Let's go through the results. The primary performance measure of the trained models is MSE, mean squared error. MSE is inversely proportional to model's performance. The lower the MSE, the better the model's performance. The MAE, mean absolute error, is also calculated, which also works as an indication of model's performance. MAE's relation with the performance is also inversely like MSE. This is the model performances in a table. The less the value of the error is better the model's performance. GRNN has a MSE value of 0.11, which is the lowest among the four. ANN's MSE value is 0.13, which is the second lowest. RFR has the highest MSE value of 0.19. It has a MSE of value of 0.14 and MAE value of 0.34. This is the risk analysis between GRNN prediction risk and actual risk. The negative y-axis represents the self-computed risk value at the epoch of each CDM. This is the graph of risk analysis between support vector regression, prediction risk, and actual risk. Random sampling was used to generate the prediction graph. Evaluation. The MSE value of 0.11 of the GRNN model means that the model predicts the risk of collision with 89% accuracy. To be more precise, there will be 89% risk of collision between the chaser and the target. This is high and alarming enough to take necessary measures to mitigate the risk and eventually avoid the collision. All other models also denotes an 80% plus on average risk factor of collision, which can be really helpful to make decisions regarding the evasive maneuvers. As it is a matter of space collision and sophisticated calculations, even the slightest measurements error can lead to disastrous situations. That is why the error margin has to be considered carefully. No matter how small the difference is, with all aspects in focus, the GRNN is the best performing model among the four models. However, it is impeccable that the GRNN model is the best suited one for the sole purpose of the study. which is predicting the risk of collision with minimum error and ensure safer space missions. Conclusion: with increasing space missions and commercial space flights, the amount of debris in low Earth orbit and high Earth orbit will only keep increasing. As a result, it will be increasingly difficult to operate safe space missions and avoid satellite collision mishaps. The collision avoidance task can become gradually convenient by employing modern deep learning techniques, and this particular study is an example of that. The risk prediction model can be used to estimate the incoming risk factors and swiftly take necessary precautions to avoid any hazards. It can be extended to analyze the risk events furthermore and guide the satellites or spacecrafts to maneuver accordingly. Thank you so much. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Tariq. Can I ask you to stop sharing your screen now, please?
Okay, sure.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you for your interesting talk on a very important, exciting application area. Does anybody have any questions for Tariq?
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Yes. So Tariq, is it my correct understanding that these prediction models, where do you see them being installed? Because you talk about basically satellite having that sort of a, based on the proximity prediction for that. So do you see this model, like in the practical sense, being uploaded to the satellites or other aircrafts?
Well, yes, in practical sense, it can be installed in satellites so that it can predict the risk and also maneuver accordingly if needed.
Can I ask a question, Tariq? Something that wasn't quite clear to me. You seemed to say that in the data that you had available to you, because in the real world, whenever a collision had been predicted, avoidance action was taken, so you didn't have data very close to potential collision. How do you know, whenever you say your model was correct or your prediction was correct, how do you know whether there really would have been collision or not? What exactly is your mean squared error compared against?
So we had the data for the CDM data, which was created by ESA, like when a space debris and a spacecraft is in a 2 days proximity to collide with each other. So they take the data from there. So and then we try, and then they have the risk calculation as well. So like how. Like if it's going to be collide or not. So on that particular area, so we took the risk from that, and then we compare the our models with that particular risk modeler, basically.
Yes. So okay. So you're comparing your prediction with their prediction, as opposed to comparing it with what would have actually happened, because there's no way of knowing that.
Yeah, sure. There's no way of doing that.
Another question I want to ask was, you mentioned an advantage of GRNN was the faster training time. Is fast training time particularly important?
So in a lot of satellites, like they have the legacy hardwares, so it is kind of important because their hardwares are not that up to date. So a faster training model can help on that particular area.
Maybe it was clear to others. I hadn't appreciated. So your intention is that the model would be executed within the satellite rather than being executed on the ground and the information sent up to the satellite?
Yeah, it will be in satellite, yes.
Okay.
Installed in satellite.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Does anybody else have a question? Okay, so if not, Tariq, thank you again for your presentation, and that was very interesting work which you described. And thanks to all our speakers for the session, which will now draw to a close, and I hope you find it enjoyable and informative. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye.